Hi, everybody, and welcome to this STL webinar called Monetizing IoT, 4 Steps for Success. So I'm your organizer today. I'm Amy Cameron, a senior analyst at STL Partners. And giving today's webinar is my colleague, Roz Parkinson. She's also a senior analyst focusing on IoT primarily. So just a couple of matters of housekeeping before I hand over. We'll have a 35-minute presentation today, followed by a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the question box throughout the presentation, and we'll get to them at the end. If we don't have time for them today, then we'll follow up with you by email afterwards. We are recording this webinar, so everyone will get access to the recording afterwards, and we'll also send out a PDF of the slides. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Roz.
Fantastic. Thank you, Amy, for that introduction. So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Roz Parkinson, and I'm a senior analyst here at STL. And as Amy said, my work primarily focuses on the area of IoT. But before we kind of go into the nuts and bolts of the webinar itself, I just wanted to take a moment to introduce STL Partners, just in case there's anybody who's dialed in today who perhaps hasn't worked with us closely before. So at STL Partners, we are very focused on the telecom sector, specifically on the future of telecoms. And we help our clients, be they operators, be they vendors, we help them make the right decisions today to define their strategies so they can succeed in the future. So on with the webinar. Now, I think that we can all agree that IoT is going to be a really revolutionary force in our lifetimes, and it's going to have a massive effect on almost every aspect of human life. So if you take a look at the picture on the screen in front of you, we think of that like a typical town today, where you have people living, working, traveling, you have goods coming to and fro, you have lots and lots of different things going on. And you imagine what that town will be like in 10 to 20 years when IoT solutions are more widely adopted. And we can see how IoT will touch every single aspect of our lives. You know, imagine how IoT can help organize healthcare, how it could help manage traffic, manage pollution, how it could make your home safer. And if we think of this in terms of market verticals, I mean, it's going to touch pretty much every single vertical you could think of. So this slide is just a snapshot of 6 that we've been looking at in detail recently, but there are many, many more. And what we're finding is, you know, as the IoT market matures, new use cases are being developed, are evolving and being discovered day by day. So this is, you know, a very exciting market. We're at a very early stage where there's a lot of development, there's a lot of experimentation, and it's, you know, going to grow very fast. And, you know, it would be logical to think, well, you know, connectivity is at the core of IoT, so therefore this must be a great growth opportunity for telcos. And 5 years ago, when we were first getting excited about IoT, there were huge expectations for the value that it would represent for operators in terms of the number of new connected devices using cellular connectivity. And what we found over the past 5 years is that that value in connectivity, you know, it really just hasn't delivered on the expectations. So, you know, there are a number of reasons, but one of the main ones is that there are cheaper connectivity types available, and there isn't always a strong use case for every single IoT device to be connected using a cellular mobile connection. So this raises a really, really important question for operators and for telcos in general, which is, you know, what should they do? What should they do about this if connectivity isn't that valuable anymore? And, you know, the second kind of question there, or the implied question is there anything that telcos can do to avoid becoming a dumb pipe when it comes to IoT? And we believe that there is a role for telcos, that there are ways that telcos can move up the value chain. And what we're going to do today is we're going to take you through some of the possible roles for telcos. We're going to talk about what we think are the most feasible ways that telcos can move up the value chain in IoT. And we're going to talk about how you can get there. So what steps do you need to take in order to define the right IoT strategy for you? So at this point, I'm just going to talk a bit about these three popular theoretical ways that telcos can monetize IoT, and we're going to have a poll at this point, just to see what you guys think, what the audience thinks about which one of these options is the most feasible for telcos. So the first one is, as a telco, you could develop advanced IoT solutions for specific verticals. This doesn't necessarily mean that you do everything end to end for that vertical, but for example, say you're focused on the automotive sector, your platform, the way that you create partnerships, it's all very focused on serving that specific vertical and that vertical's needs. The second option is providing the horizontal IoT platform. So you're creating this software layer to organize and monitor the data and the devices that are connected, and that can be applied to any vertical. And then the third one is about monetizing IoT data and insights. So obviously, when we connect all of these devices, we're going to have data and insights that were previously just completely unobtainable. So is there an option, or is there an opportunity here that telcos can realize, where they can make money from monetizing the data and insights from IoT systems? So we're going to run the poll right now. You'll have a minute or so just to say which one of these three do you think is the most feasible for telcos, and then we're going to share the results with you. Yeah, so it's great to see you all voting there. We'll just give it a second more and see. Okay, I think if we cut it off there, and now hopefully you should be able to see the poll results in front of your screen, or on your screen. And it's really interesting, actually. So developing advanced IoT solutions for specific verticals, I mean, that scores quite highly. I'd say that all three score quite highly. So we have 34% for vertical solutions, 42% for providing the horizontal IoT platform, and 51% of the audience think that monetizing IoT data and insights is the best opportunity for telcos to monetize IoT. And that is pretty interesting. It's interesting feedback. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk you through what we think, having looked at these three. And, the first point is that what we really think telcos need to do in order to move up the IoT value chain, first and foremost, is to develop advanced IoT solutions for specific verticals. And we will talk through how you can do this on this webinar. Now then, the reason why we're not so keen on the option for providing the horizontal IoT platform is because this is an incredibly crowded market. There are so many different platforms out there. There are so many people who want to be the platform provider. And, telcos are in a position where they are competing against software providers, ICT providers, companies that specialize in this type of this type of technology. So it's going to be really, really difficult for telcos to differentiate their offer and for them to make a really strong case for why, developers should use their platform when they're developing new IoT solutions, or why an end user should, use an IoT system which rests on their platform. Now then, monetizing IoT data and insights. So, undoubtedly, some IoT data will be valuable because of the new insights that it will allow us to form. However, so many people want to monetize IoT data, and there's a simple fact that some of the data won't be that useful either. So this is a bit of a tricky one, because possibly in the future, telcos might be in a position where they could monetize IoT data and insights. But in order to get there, they not only have to, develop their IoT solutions and be very, very present in the IoT ecosystem. They also need to develop big data capabilities, AI capabilities, to analyze all of this data and to be able to deliver new insights in a very timely manner, because a lot of the kind of future that we're imagining here, we're talking about real time or near real time data analytics. So, okay, telcos could technically do this, but it's going to require a lot of commitment, a lot of investment, and that will have to go hand in hand with their, IoT solutions. So that's why we think that developing the advanced IoT solution for specific verticals and taking that vertically focused approach is the most feasible way that telcos can move up the IoT value chain and start seeing ROI sooner. I guess the final point about monetizing IoT data and insights is that, in terms of when you're going to realize ROI, return on investment, it's going to take longer because, from the telcos that we've looked at who are working in the big data area, they've still got quite a long way to go. So, maybe in the future, that might be an option. But for now, we think that telcos need to be focusing on verticals in order to move up the value chain. However, interestingly, and you probably have spotted this problem already, is that you obviously can't focus on every single vertical. Even the largest telcos won't be able to do that. So what do you do when there's an opportunity to provide just connectivity perhaps, or connectivity in a basic platform to, within an IoT project where you're not, kind of leading the charge in one of your core verticals? So, in order to avoid missing out on these opportunities to earn some incremental revenue, we think that telcos need to develop their horizontal strategies as well, their horizontal capabilities, so that they don't miss out on those incremental revenue opportunities. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take you through our 4-step process, which helps telcos define that T-shaped strategy, helps them think about which verticals they want to be focusing on and which roles they want to be playing in the IoT ecosystem. So the first step of our process is to really look beyond connected device forecasts. I'm sure you've all seen loads of them. There are going to be billions and billions of objects connected by 2020 or 2025. And there's almost a competition between companies to come up with the biggest forecast. And, all this tells us in terms of telco strategy for IoT is that IoT is going to be a big deal. It doesn't really help us any more than that. And there are a few reasons why I say that. So firstly, these numbers cover so many different connectivity types, from Bluetooth, from Wi-Fi. Some of them cover fixed. Some of them also cover lots of different devices like mobile phones or iPads, that we wouldn't call an IoT device. So the numbers are just too big, really. And, if you really think about this hyper-connected world that we're moving to, and what end users are actually going to pay for with their IoT solutions. If you imagine a smart city and they want a new transport management system, they're paying for the IoT service outcome. They don't want to see all of the components broken out and pay for the connectivity separately. So, the kind of payment method is quite different. And as we've seen with mobile, we've seen that this idea of price per device, the price per device that people are willing to pay, end users are willing to pay, tends to decrease over time, especially if you're in a very competitive market and you have some players who are trying to undercut and enter into a price war. So therefore we think just look beyond those device forecasts and then think about it from a different point of view. So our second step is mapping out the IoT strategy for your telco. And there are two parts to this step, and we see this as a kind of iterative process. And depending upon your telco's culture, you might start by deciding which role you want to play, or you might start by choosing your core verticals. In a way, it doesn't matter, and you kind of need to go through it a couple of times for a couple of iterations to get to the end result. So what I'm going to do next is kind of take you through the 4 different roles that telcos can play. And we see 4 possible telco roles in the IoT ecosystem. And I'm going to describe them one by one in detail. But for now, all I want you to take on board is the fact that these are not mutually exclusive. What we see as a good strategy for telcos is for them to kind of configure their efforts, and they will play a stronger, more value-adding role, such as an ecosystem orchestrator in certain core verticals, but then be happy to play slightly lower value roles, but where they can still gain some incremental revenues in other verticals, which they haven't decided to focus on. So the first role is that of the wholesaler. And this is the lowest value adding role within the matrix. The telco is only providing part of the offer, and it's very much a traditional one-sided value chain. In this role, a telco would provide connectivity. They might provide a basic technical platform, but they would have no vertical focus, and they would not lead the IoT project. So, in this role, they'd probably would be working with a systems integrator who would be taking the lead, have the customer relationship, and then the telco is just providing the connectivity and some of the technical, needs of the project. And, as we've said, this is quite a low value utility role. It's very difficult to differentiate here because, any telco in this role is going to be, you're basically providing connectivity and not much else. So it's difficult to differentiate. And the only kind of, not exactly advantage, but there are some telcos that I've spoken to who kind of say, well, we know we're not a big guy, we're not a big player in the industry. We know we can't go and be an ecosystem orchestrator. So we'll be a wholesaler and it'll be fine because we'll get, IoT is a big pie. We'll get a small slice of that pie and it's better than nothing. Yeah, so that's a wholesaler role. It doesn't provide much value by itself. It can offer some incremental value. The solution provider is the next role that telcos could play. And this one is a little bit more valuable than that of the wholesaler. In this one, the telco would be providing a complete turnkey solution for the IoT service. They would lead the IoT project. However, it's only possible for certain use cases. And I think a good example of where a telco could play the role of a solution provider in an IoT solution, an IoT service, would be something like smart parking. So if you imagine a smart parking application versus a smart city project, the smart city, you have got so many different actors involved in that ecosystem, and their devices need to be able to communicate and interoperate. if you imagine a smart parking system, it's very easy for one entity, one company to control the connectivity, the platform, and the solution. It's very easy because it's a very discrete, standalone solution. However, it's never going to make that much money. You know, a smart parking solution versus a smart city or something where you're kind of involved in a kind of broader ecosystem, the value will be limited. And I think something that you need to remember if you're going to be a solution provider is that in 20 years or so, when we are, you know, heading towards this hyper-connected world, you might need to make your previously standalone solution interoperable with other people's technology. You know, imagine that smart city in 20 years' time when it has autonomous cars or lots of connected vehicles, a more sophisticated connected transport management system, and it needs to be able to share data across, you know, across all of these different systems. And your previously standalone smart parking solution needs to be able to communicate and interoperate. So you might need to build in some interoperability, or at least be open to that. And the last point about this one is that you do need some sector expertise as a telco going into industries and trying to be a turnkey solution provider. You know, you have to be able to convince your end users to buy from you as opposed to, for example, you know, a dedicated parking solutions provider. Now, the third role that telcos can play, and at this point, we're moving to the right-hand side of the matrix, and we're looking at roles where it's an ecosystem value network. It's a multi-sided business model. So the third role that's possible for telcos is that of the ecosystem component provider. And in this, as the name may suggest, the telcos would provide a key component, a key enabling component to the IoT ecosystem. It could be horizontal, could be. But it could be quite difficult, as I've already said, for telcos to deliver a horizontal solution. And honestly, I see a lot of people focusing on a lot of people focusing on the platform, the technology platform for this. And it's, you know, it would be possible, perhaps telcos could do this, but it would require an awful lot of work. So if we just go back to kind of imagining what this ecosystem component provider is, I think a fantastic example, although not from the world of IoT, is PayPal. So PayPal is an absolutely trusted payments platform. So many different people, different e-commerce ecosystems use this. It has great brand recognition, customer loyalty, you know, it's very widely used. So, you know, I often get asked by people, what's the killer app for IoT? What's the PayPal for IoT? You know, what could they create that would be used universally? And it's really, really tough. It is a really competitive role. You know, we do know of some telcos who would like to be in this role and who are thinking about things like, you know, with maybe not so much the IoT platform itself, but thinking about future networks, trying to be more software centric in their business practices, having highly automated rapid release cycles to keep their software constantly up to date and cutting edge. But this is a huge leap from where telcos are now. So we think it will be very, very difficult for them to get there. And we think, you know, with the IoT platforms as well, you know, they're competing against software-centric companies who are already, you know, able to do these rapid release cycles and, you know, keep very, you know, be very cutting edge all the time. So it's a really, really tough one. If telcos want to go down this route, good luck. You know, I think it would be possible for you to do it, but I think it's going to take a lot of investment, and I think it's going to take a lot of change, quite frankly, in terms of you know, the way that you operate. But it's not impossible. So that's the component provider option. And then the last one is the ecosystem orchestrator. And I think this is a really interesting role. And we have seen some examples of telcos starting to actually be able to play this role. So I see it as being one with high potential. So in this role, again, you have your B2B to X business model, which the telco is in the middle of. It requires a vertical focus, and this is really important. And the other thing which is really important is the telco needs to add extra value. So this isn't just about having a technical solution or a technical platform that people use because it's so good. This is about adding value through perhaps professional services, or helping your new customers, your OEMs, say it's a white goods manufacturer looking to target the smart home market, helping them go to market, helping them have their devices adopted. There are some interesting examples, but basically the telco needs to add value. There needs to be a reason why your partners want to work with you, as opposed to any of these other, platform providers or people who are trying to create their own IoT ecosystems. The only downside to this one is that it's a really intensive role. It's high value, but it requires a lot of commitment. So you can't do it for every single vertical. So that's why we talk about this T-shaped business model and being selective and focusing on a few core verticals. So as I said, it's a high value role, but it requires a lot of commitment. One of the kind of things that you're going to have to really work hard on is building your credibility in chosen verticals. And this can be done through M&A. We've also seen telcos like Telstra, for example, when they've been focusing on the healthcare sector, making some really important key hires, in very high level positions, highly visible positions from the healthcare sector, in order to convince their potential customers in that sector that they really understand their client needs. They really understand how IoT, or how a telco can provide extra value to that sector. And the last one is about facilitating new partnerships. And I said I had a nice example about telcos playing this role. So I'll share that example with you now, which is DTAG's Quivicon platform for smart home. So one of their applications is about providing smart home security. Now, they also partner with third-party device manufacturers and OEMs. One of the companies they partner with is Sonos, who provides smart speakers. Now, if you are a Quivicon customer and you are using their smart home security system and you have a Sonos smart speaker, you can set it up through the Quivicon app so that your smart speaker will imitate the sound of a dog barking when you are out, in order to put off any intruders. Now, you can't just do that through the Sonos smart speaker itself. You need to do it through the Quivicon app. You need to have the smart home security solution as well. But that's just one little example of how the telco has not just created a technical platform to bring together these different players in a consumer smart home, but they're adding extra value. They've made something, this extra service available that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. And I think that's a really interesting example. So the key question is, how do you decide which roles and verticals you should focus on? I think I've taken you through, the different roles in enough detail that hopefully you could kind of take a step back and think about your capabilities and your appetite for this kind of innovation and change. In terms of the verticals, we see three really important questions. Does this vertical have high value potential, particularly for mobile connectivity or the type of connectivity that you're providing? Do we currently have capabilities in this vertical? And if not, do we have the appetite to develop them? So those are the three key questions that you need to answer to help decide which verticals you want to focus on. And if I go to the next slide, so once we've decided our verticals, the next step is really to be brave and to commit to them. And I say be brave because I have lots of conversations with telcos, and I feel like there's this myth that if you are a large telco, that that the vertical strategy is an option for you. But if you're not this big multinational telco, you can't do it. It's just impossible. And I would say that being brave is much more important than being big when it comes to succeeding in IoT. And there are a couple of reasons why I say that. So, firstly, from the conversations that I have with people, I know that there are some very large telcos out there who really struggle to take the leap of faith needed to commit to a vertical approach. They are far more interested, or they are cautious, okay? They don't want to create what they would call a white elephant, focusing on one particular vertical and then, it not working. So they want to take an incremental client-led approach. And I would say this might seem like the safer option now, but IoT is a very, very competitive industry. And we're already seeing that, there will be some verticals where there will be a strong first mover advantage, such as connected cars, for example. And that's, we've written several research reports about that already. So really, you need to be brave. The second reason why I don't think this is just an opportunity for the largest multinational telcos is that in some cases it will be more important that you have a local presence, a national presence, and those relationships with core verticals. So if you think about the healthcare sector, for example, the regulatory and political environment there in a specific country or market will exert different pressures on those decision makers. So, having sensitivity to those, having awareness of those by having a national presence in your specific market will be more valuable than, say, a large multinational. They've done a healthcare solution in one market. They want to just bring it over to a different market. There are circumstances where having those relationships and having that knowledge of the national market will be more important than size. So in terms of committing to your core verticals and developing your credibility, your expertise in them, and succeeding in them, there are 5 things that we think you need to do. So the first one is building your brand credibility. And I already gave you the example of Telstra making some strategic key hires, as well as, the other options which would be M&A or developing, organic capabilities. The second one is about building your network of partners. So particularly if you want to play that ecosystem orchestrator role, you need to be very, very well connected with the other companies that are operating, in this field, so that you are able to add value, to bring new solutions, so that your end customers see you as the go-to for their IoT solutions. The next one is to identify who the customer is, and this might sound a little bit obvious, but if you think about a smart city, there are lots of different stakeholders involved in the decision-making process when it comes to investing in smart city projects, particularly when we're not just talking about, something like, a very kind of discrete one like a smart parking project. If you're thinking about broader projects, you need to speak to lots of different stakeholders. It could be that you even, instead of talking to the authorities, you might talk to the companies that they contract. So, I spoke to one telco who is deliberately targeting kind of infrastructure companies and facility providing companies who do things like waste collection, because they are the ones that are going to receive the benefit by making their processes more efficient, more effective. So therefore, some telcos are targeting them. It might be that you need to basically court several different stakeholders in order to really build that relationship and sell into that solution. And the last one, no, sorry, not the last one, the fourth one is understanding what your customer will pay for. Now, I have a couple of interesting examples here, one from the smart home area and one from the smart city area, where there seem to be key applications that people will pay for, and then that kind of opens the door to the telco or the IoT provider selling additional things on top. In the smart home sector, we spoke to a particular IoT provider who told us that the number one product that their smart home customers buy as their first product is a smart home security solution. And in most cases, within 6 months of having bought that smart home security solution, they will then purchase an add-on solution to add to their smart homes experience. So it could be it could be something to do with comfort, it could be something to do with pet monitoring, it could be anything. But often, it seems like security is the issue that will get them to spend on the smart home solution. And then once they've made that leap, then they're more willing to add on extra things on top of that. So I think that that's a really key thing when we think about this, the kind of how your end users are going to purchase IoT solutions. It's very unlikely that people will be able to buy an end-to-end smart home solution. Some people will, but that's kind of at the top end of the market. For most people, it will be plug and play. It will be, gradually building it up in a modular way. So if you understand what the kind of key product is for them, then that helps open that door. And the last point is to really be patient and be persistent. We've seen some examples of telcos who've started off with one IoT strategy and then they've had to pivot and they've had to change and they've had to adapt. I think that's just part of the reality of working in such a kind of early stage industry. But we are confident that there are opportunities for telcos here, and we're seeing some telcos, have success by playing that ecosystem orchestrator role, by almost acting as a systems integrator in some cases, and showing real leadership in certain verticals. So the final part, or the final step of our T-shaped model, our T-shaped IoT strategy for telcos, is around developing those horizontal capabilities so that you don't miss out on opportunities to earn incremental revenue by taking such a focused vertical approach. So if we imagine an operator which has identified the transport area and safety and security as the key verticals it wants to focus on, and we know that there will be other opportunities where it can provide connectivity, or maybe it could provide the technical platform. You need to think about how you're going to serve these as well. And it could be that you want to invest in your connectivity capabilities. I mean, I've seen some very exciting kind of future-looking things about opportunities with network slicing or with AI-controlled networks to help manage all of these different devices. But I think that what we see is that it is very, very difficult for telcos to earn, to create a lot of value out of just providing connectivity. There, of course, will be some cases where you're happy to play that connectivity role, but if you don't at least focus on one or two verticals, you won't be able to move up the value chain, and you run a very real risk of being commoditized. So that's why we have put forward this idea of the T-shaped strategy. You have one or two core verticals. Depending on your size, depending on your appetite, you could have 4 or 5. But you also are willing to play this lower value role by providing connectivity or the technology platform so that you don't miss out on those incremental revenue opportunities. And that is everything that I wanted to share with you. I'm sorry I went a little bit over time, but yeah, I hope you all found it interesting, and I think we'll open up for questions now.
All right, great. So we've had a few questions in, Roz. I'll start you off with one of the later ones that I think is a sort of a good one to ease you into the Q&A period. One of the audience is asking, if your telco hasn't started building an IoT strategy at all yet, is it too late? Is there still time?
Wow, that is a really good question. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I'd be a little bit surprised if there are any telcos out there who haven't started building their IoT strategy because, having been to MWC, Mobile World Congress, which will be, with us in another few weeks in Barcelona, it feels like, every single telco I talk to is doing something in IoT, or at least trying to. So I don't think it's too late. But I think you need to get started now. You can't wait any longer because the train is leaving the station. What's next?
All right, so we've got another question about the sort of four different roles that you introduced for the IoT players. And someone is asking, is it really sort of more feasible for a telco to be an ecosystem orchestrator than an ecosystem component provider? Is it, I mean, I know that maybe that was misunderstood, or is it sort of that like being a component provider is difficult because that's sort of developing a product that goes across a whole ecosystem, which is generally not the way telcos have approached product development. Is that the right interpretation?
So I'll kind of answer the question by giving an example. So I speak to lots of people who have this idea that they can be the platform, just provide this technical layer completely horizontally. And there are so many different platforms out there. And it feels like everybody that I speak to, be they industrial technology companies, be they telcos, be they software providers, they're all saying to me, yeah, we're going to do the platform and we're going to make it better than anybody else. And that's why we're going to get lots of different people, using our platform. And it's just not possible that all of these people who are saying they're going to create platforms will succeed in it. There will be winners and losers, and it will be the companies that are able to iterate really fast, do these agile software updates, and be very, cutting edge and up to date. That will win that battle. We know some telcos who want to get there, but it's a huge leap from where they currently are. Now, we've seen a couple of telcos actually focus on developing specific platforms for specific verticals. So Quivercon and their smart home platform, which is a DTAC product, and also AT&T, has its Drive platform. And the thing is, why I would call those ecosystem orchestrators as opposed to the ecosystem component is because they're doing so much more than providing just a technical platform, and they are taking a vertical focus in order to add value. And that's why I said technically, telcos are capable. Technically, telcos could do, a platform. A ecosystem component, but it will take a hell of a lot of work and it's very, very competitive. We think that actually taking the vertical approach and trying to be an ecosystem orchestrator will be, will be a bit easier for them to differentiate themselves. And we're already seeing some telcos having success there. So that's why we think that's the better option for them.
Thanks, Roz. So we've got another question, which is asking about where does sort of the security side of IoT fit into this? Is that something that you think fits into this framework, or is that something that you think telcos have a role in?
Yeah, so IoT security or just cybersecurity in general, it's a very complicated topic. And so I have heard some arguments that this is, guaranteeing IoT security is something that telcos could do, and perhaps they'd be in a better place to do it because they have visibility of the network. So they could be, in a position to respond to, any red flags more quickly. It's interesting. So I've heard that argument from people who are on the telco side. Now, people that I speak to who are in the security business say that every single person, every single object, every single element of an IoT system is open to attack. So therefore, IoT security is the responsibility of everybody in the value chain. And interestingly, a lot of of the attacks which have been associated with consumer IoT products, the weak point has actually been the consumer themselves. It has been things like weak passwords that have caused the problem. So there, I think IoT security is a big issue, but I think that everybody needs to be, working towards it. And this idea that telcos could provide, a wrapper to make, to guarantee IoT security. I've heard an interesting idea in the smart city space about, telcos providing a smart city cloud, which would be secured. You'd be asking them to guarantee an enormous amount of risk and take on an enormous amount of risk when IoT security is very complicated, and there are so many human elements where things can go wrong. So IoT security, I haven't put it in the matrix. I think if anybody can, find a fantastic solution for it, they're going to make an awful lot of money because it's a key barrier and it's something that people are very concerned about. However, it takes more than one player within the ecosystem to ensure it. And therefore, I wouldn't see that as a component that telcos can provide.
So talking about other challenges to sort of impeding the growth of IoT, we have another question talking about interoperability and what are the options for telcos in terms of, is there a role for them to play, and how do they manage interoperability, especially when you're talking about places like smart cities and their networks and everything that they're trying to manage is already becoming increasingly complex.
Yeah, so I think this is somewhere where you need to accept that IoT is an ecosystem play, and trying to kind of provide a top-down IoT solution for something as complicated as a smart city is just not going to happen. So there needs to be this openness in terms of being willing to work with other connectivity providers, with other connectivity types as well. It kind of depends which IoT vertical you're focusing on, because the way that the connectivity types interoperate, or the way that the devices interoperate, will be different. So if we take the smart home as an example, lots of smart home solutions include a hub which will be enabled with Zigbee, with the Z-Wave, with Wi-Fi, with Bluetooth. It will plug into your Ethernet as well. So it will be able to work with anything, is the idea. Anything that would be realistic in the home environment. Now, with a smart city, it's going to be slightly different. You can't necessarily have those types of hubs, making it possible for every type of different device to connect. So it's a bit of horses for courses when it comes to interoperability. I think that one of the key things, though, is to really engage with the vertical that you're working in, so that you understand, what their specific needs are for connectivity, and be open to the fact that, as the IoT market is developing, we're seeing more and more complex IoT use cases come together, where we're talking about, bringing in data from, lots of different sources, or getting lots of different objects to communicate with one another. Interestingly, actually, on the interoperability side of things, if we imagine this hyper-connected world, and we imagine a smart city. We did a report recently that Amy and I collaborated on about how blockchain could be an enabler for smart city solutions, and how using using this technology of blockchain, which has certain benefits in terms of its security and its openness, could enable things such as peer-to-peer payments. So if you think about how a smart connected car or an autonomous car might interact in a city environment, it might want to pay tolls, it might want to pay parking automatically. We see things like blockchain as really important enablers for things like this.
All right, thanks. I will give you one final question before we tune out for the day. This is quite an interesting one about who telcos should partner with for the horizontal platform. And I know this is a difficult one. So one of the questions sort of is about if telcos partner with some of the biggies like AWS, Microsoft to host their platform, does that put them at risk of being pushed out of this market over the long term? And does the vertical strategy sort of prevent them from getting pushed out? Is that part of your view?
That's a really good question. And we've done quite a lot of work about how telcos can partner with GAFA, so Google, Amazon, Facebook, these companies which are huge, in the software area. And so I think that the idea with the vertical focus is that there will be certain core verticals where you as the telco are seen as the key relationship holder. You are the go-to person for your end users, and they want to use your solution. You might use a Microsoft platform to provide that solution, but they want to work with you, so you have got that credibility. There will be other areas where it might be that Amazon or Google have got the upper hand, or they're playing that ecosystem orchestrator role, which is something they definitely want to do. I mean, we're seeing them do a lot, especially in the area of autonomous vehicles. So I think you need to pick and choose, where you want to partner with them or where you don't. I think that it would be a mistake to not, to ignore this vertical focus and to not focus on any verticals and build your credibility there, because if you don't do that, we think it's going to be really difficult for you to differentiate yourselves and to move up the value chain. So we would implore you to to adopt that vertical approach.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Roz, for such a great presentation. I know that there are some questions that we haven't had time to answer, so we'll get back to you through email if we didn't answer your individual question on the webinar today. So this is being recorded, so all of you will be able to access the recording. We'll send you the link over the next day or so, and then over the next week we'll put all the slides in a PDF as well as with the poll results from the beginning of the webinar, and we'll email those to you directly. And if you think of any other questions afterwards, then let us know. We'd be happy to hear them. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.